Tate McRae has all the makings of a huge pop star, the moves of Britney, the music of the Pussycat Dolls, and the hairography of 2000s Beyoncé, but somehow she's still stuck on the edge of stardom. The most common criticisms I see are that she dances too much, or her music is too generic, or she's too referential of 2000s pop stars. But really, I think that Tate only has one barrier limiting her, and that is an unclear identity. And all she has to do is define it. Now, she's only 21, so is it even fair to force her into some sort of corporate box, or to expect her to have this figured out already? Well, to me, a strong identity doesn't have to mean it's restrictive or manufactured. It just has to communicate who Tate authentically is clearly, even if that means only focusing on one or two things and changing it as she progresses in her career. Honestly, I think she already has a pretty good foundation, she just needs to refine it. So I want to discuss how she can do this across her music, performance, and image while still staying true to herself so that she can be recognized for the star that she absolutely is. Just to give some background for Tate McRae, if you don't know who she is, she was born on July 1st, 2003 and grew up in Calgary, Canada, which represent because I'm also Canadian. When she was a kid, she was very popular in the dance world. She has won several competitive titles, even beating Maddie Ziegler, who was one of the stars on the show Dance Moms. Tate McRae also was a third-place finalist in So You Think You Can Dance The Next Generation. So it's really important to know that Tate McRae is somewhat of a dance prodigy. Then when she was around 13 and 14, she started posting covers and her own original songs to YouTube, and this is how she went viral and landed a record deal. So also really important to know that she has always been singing and songwriting, so she's not some manufactured pop star. She released her first hit single, You Broke Me First, in 2020, which is somewhat of a sad girl anthem, and then her first album, I Used to Think I Could Fly, in 2022. Then in just one short year, she rebranded to a sexy dance girl with Think Later, and she just released her third album in February 2025, So Close to What, which resulted in a sold-out world tour and did debut at #1 on the Billboard 200. So clearly she is rising in the pop industry. But even despite this, it's really weird to see so much divisiveness around her stardom. Like I mentioned in the beginning, a lot of people criticize that she's dancing too much, or that her voice is too hard to understand, or that she looks too basic. I'm not going to discuss all of the social commentary on Tate McRae in depth, but if you're interested and you want to know a little bit more about what people are saying, you can go check out this video by Cameron Suzanne. She does a really excellent job of breaking all of that down. This video is more just my opinion, and like I said, all of these criticisms I think are symptoms of just one main problem, which is a lack of artistic identity. And the core of this problem lies with her music. You can have the nicest stage and the best dance moves, but it will fall apart, I think, if you don't have strong music. Tate McRae's music is currently leaned into the dirty pop aesthetic of the 2000s, and I actually think that this is both good and bad for her. On one hand, she wants to make music to make her dance. So this is such an authentic choice for her, and it really plays to her strengths as a performer. She's obviously a fantastic dancer, and there is nothing more dance than 2000s club music. I think that this genre is also so refreshing because this dirty pop vibe has really been missing from the music landscape for forever, and there is so much nostalgia for this era right now. On the other hand, while I love the dirty pop aesthetic, I think that she sometimes leans a little too hard into the 2000s references. So much so that her music starts to sound generic rather than unmistakably Tate McRae. So for example, when I listen to her music sometimes, I think of, oh, this sounds like a Nelly Furtado song, or this sounds like a Britney Spears song, or a Pussycat Dolls song. I don't really know what Tate McRae's sound is. And I love a good reference, but I think there needs to be a unique spin on them too. And then also at the same time, even though she references so many different 2000s artists, her music often blends together within the album. And then if you compare So Close to What to her last album, Think Later, the albums sound also very similar to each other, rather than an evolution of her music. And then at the same time of all of that, this is like, her music, I swear, is so paradoxical because she somehow doesn't lean into dirty pop enough. Like, for example, on So Close to What, there are so many more slower songs than I would have expected from this album. And don't get me wrong, I really love her slow songs too, but she put out Sports Car and It's Okay, I'm Okay, and I wasn't expecting those to be some of the only hard-hitting dirty pop songs on the album. I also think that she struggles a little bit lyrically. I think Tate just hasn't found her songwriting voice yet, and honestly, this is so fair because oftentimes it'll take a couple albums for artists to find this. I think that Ariana Grande did not find her sound until Thank You Next. Sabrina also is a songwriter. Her songwriting has this very distinct, witty, and cheeky wordplay, and a lot of her lyrics transcend pop culture.
Have you ever tried this one?
And then also someone like Chappell Roan, she has a lot of dancey beats, but you can tell a lot of her lyrics come from a very introspective place. I think with Tate, I do think it's there, but it's just not as strong. I do want to note that Tate McRae did co-write every single song on this album. She is incredibly talented, and I really loved watching her break down her songwriting process for the song Greenlight. So she is very involved in the process and in her art, and I just respect that so much. And there are some really good concepts within this specific album. I really love Purple Lace Bra. So I think she's on her way. I really do. I just think it's gonna take a little bit of time to really refine this songwriting voice and the instrumental side as well. The one thing I think that is quite distinctive for Tate McRae in terms of her music is actually her voice. Her voice is very divisive because she does have that cursive way of singing, and sometimes it's like really difficult to know what the heck she's saying. But personally, I really love her voice. I think it's so beautiful. I especially love it on ballads, but I can understand why some people might get annoyed with it a little bit. But I do think that that's like one of the things that's making her stand out and be a little bit more distinctive because her voice is quite recognizable. So if I were to give some suggestions to Tate McRae on defining her musical identity, I would love to see her truly strangle the dirty pop genre, like full on, I need you to make me an entire dance album, okay? Not just a couple singles. I need a full Britney Spears Blackout 2.0. But then within that dirty pop genre, she really needs to work on finding her own sound. And I think with the success of Greedy and Sports Car, I think those are really on the right track. I do think we can absolutely still have the slower songs in there too. I think Purple Lace Bra and Revolving Door are some really good starting places, and just explore that sound a little bit more. And then I think my last suggestion in terms of like her musical identity is really to just take some time between albums, because she has been a workhorse. I swear, this girl has not stopped working. She has been pumping an album out every single year for the past like 3 years, and truly that is so commendable. I mean, she made a whole album on tour, like that's insane. But I think that sometimes to be at our most creative, we also need to take some breaks as well, and also just live life, because I find that a lot of the concepts are very similar between Think Later and So Close to Now. And I think if she had a little bit more time between albums to really develop her sound and also just experience more, I think you'd really hear that growth in the music. Tate McRae has had a lot of success with some really catchy songs, but I think one of the other big elements of Tate McRae's success is her performance ability. Her dance breaks have gone viral so many times. Also, shout out to Sean Bankhead, who is her choreographer. I absolutely love this man. He knows exactly how to choreograph a music video. But Tate McRae also has like insane extensions. Obviously, she's like an amazing dancer, and she absolutely can command a stage. She's also one of the first Gen Z pop stars to place dance at the forefront of her craft. I know she's not the only pop girl that can dance. Of course, there's like Normani and Tinashe and Tyla. Oh my god, I love Tyla too. But she's definitely the most technically trained and the one that is popping off the most for dance right now. And I think that a dancer like this has really been missing from the pop sphere for so long, and I absolutely embrace this as someone who grew up dancing myself. That said, even though I think Tate McRae is an excellent performer, I do think there are also a couple of problem areas or areas to work on. So for example, Tate McRae definitely has a confident stage presence. She can absolutely hit the moves and strut the stage, but I think sometimes she's a little too rehearsed. She's in her head too much, or like I can almost tell that she's like counting the 8 counts. And sometimes the moves don't necessarily reach her facial expressions. If you watch Britney Spears perform in her earlier days, who Tate McRae is often compared to, Britney is genuinely such a good performer. You can just see it in her face how fierce she is, and she just feels the music. Beyonce is another really great example of this too. She's a very hard-hitting dancer, but she also embodies like every single moment she's on this stage. I think Tate is so close to getting to this level. She has a similar Sasha Fierce alter ego who's called Tatiana, which I think is so funny, but she just has to let loose a little bit more. And I think if she can marry the emotions and her acting into her dance, that'll really help with storytelling. Another criticism Tate often gets under the performance umbrella, which I personally do not agree with, is that she dances too much. I actually think Tate McRae is getting so much better at knowing when to sing and how much to dance. I won't lie, she did struggle a little bit with this at like the Billboard Awards. But with her recent performances on SNL and Jimmy Fallon, she's really started to figure this out. Like the dance was still quite complex, but it was a lot less erratic and it allowed her to showcase her vocals a lot more. Not to mention, Tate does not lip sync. She is very good at staying on key while dancing, and I don't think people realize how hard this is. Like the breath work to be able to dance this much and sing is actually insane. Tate McRae has also cited Beyonce as a huge inspiration, saying that if Beyonce can train to do it, I can also learn. And you just have to respect her dedication to that. I also want to say that we often forget that dance is an art as well, and it takes immense athletics and skill to do, and some music is made to dance too. So of course, Tate is going to dance to her music. I personally think that dance adds so much to the performance. It's not a distraction from the music. I think it's totally fine if you don't care for this type of a performance, but I don't think it's bad that she dances so much if she can balance it out with her singing, because I think it makes for a great show. I think what is most problematic though about her performance ability is unfortunately the comparisons to Britney Spears, which Tate McRae isn't really doing enough to separate herself from. Now honestly, this one is so tricky because it's not Tate McRae's fault that people keep comparing her to Britney just because she dances. Like that's not something that she can control, and it just unfortunately comes with the territory. Britney was also compared to Madonna and Janet and Paula, so it happens to every new artist. But I think this is a bit of a bigger issue for Tate because it's just another element that feeds into that copy and pasted manufactured identity. Even though we know, like if you're fans of Tate McRae, you would know that she was born to perform and make music. But because she isn't communicating her own uniqueness, it's a lot harder to break free from that mold for the general public. Britney was able to do that quite well because she had a massive business machine behind her to produce an undeniably Britney sound and specifically targeted a teen audience, which was completely new for the time. And there were so many other Britney copy and pastes after her that just failed because they weren't unique. The comparisons aren't necessarily bad and they're not necessarily avoidable, but I think that we can do a little bit better at showcasing how she is different. And I think we can do this with a unique sound, but also with a more defined image. I think her visual identity is probably her second biggest issue next to her music. But I do also think that some of it is quite good. So I want to talk about what I like first before getting into the suggestions. I think her visual identity for Think Later was very consistent. There was a very obvious sports and hockey aesthetic, from her music videos to her album cover to her tour. And this matches her Canadian roots so well, of course, because hockey. And she also had an ex-boyfriend who was a hockey player. So I really like how this was quite personal to her. And it was also pretty unique. Like I haven't seen anyone else in the pop landscape dressed like a hockey player. So I think this was really on the right track to building a sort of sense of a signature look that made sense for Tate McRae. She's still carrying this sporty look into her So Close to What era, but now we've also added a couple other visual elements. One is driving and cars, which is supposed to reflect the theme of the album. So Close to What is essentially talking about Tate McRae constantly hitting these massive goals, but there's always another one right after, and so you really have to find joy in the process. She also has the imagery of stardom and dealing with celebrity and the media. I think my favorite way that this was reflected is in her sports car music video, where instead of having sports cars in the video, she is actually the car on display and only she can judge herself, not the media. However, I do wish there was at least one car in the video. I would have loved her to like get out of the car in the beginning or get into the car at the end or something. And then the last piece of imagery that she has in this era is a very vulnerable, stripped down version of herself. I think my favorite example of this is in her Revolving Door music video, which has all these doors, which represents all the songs on the album. And the video itself is reflecting this never-ending loop that she feels her life is like, which is very emotionally draining. So I think that with all of that, there is definitely a decent foundation here. Like, there is consistency, there is vision, but somehow it's still not really connecting to a lot of people. And again, I think there is still this issue of a lack of clarity and personality. For example, even though she does have some pretty consistent imagery throughout these eras, her So Close to What album cover, it's pretty, but it also does not match the vibe of this album at all. It also doesn't really stand out on the shelf. And I actually like her alternate version so much better, which really relates to the celebrity theming that she talks about in a couple of her songs, and also the dance element of her music, and also the whole journey thing of hitting these milestones and it feeling unfulfilling. And then outside of her album, if you look at her overall image, so for example, on her Instagram or her website, there isn't really a distinct vibe here either. Whereas if you take a look at Sabrina Carpenter's Instagram or Olivia Rodrigo's Instagram or Billie Eilish, you can almost instantly understand these artists and know exactly what they're about. But Tate McRae, it's like almost this very beige visual identity. Not only does she have so many 2000s references in her music, but they're all over her imagery too. In her music videos, she's referenced Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, the Pussycat Dolls, plus she's had a red carpet moment referencing Britney Spears. It's really hard to know who Tate specifically is, and I don't think it's a shock when you learn that her album rollout for So Close to What was a little bit of a mess. There was a whole leak that happened, and she also changed the album cover like a couple days into releasing the album, and then she changed it back. So on one hand, while we do have somewhat of a vision, the vision is at the same time kind of messy. So if all of this visual imagery is sort of working, but not really, what would work? Well, this really just comes down to personal branding. And one of the ways I really love to think about this is relating pop stars and their album cycles to specific archetypes that you would find in movies. And I say character, but it really is still that person. It's not a fake version of that person. It's just a curated, digestible version of them so that the audience can just understand them easily. So I thought I would try my hand at creating a visual identity archetype for Tate McRae, and I'd love to know what you think about it. So how do we create a visual identity for this pop star? Well, I think it's really important that we stay authentic to Tate McRae. I just really want to elevate what's already here. So my goal was to make her individual personality very clear in this era specifically, just to make it simple. So first, I think that a visual identity really has to reflect Tate McRae's musical identity. And even though it's not the most distinct, I think we can put together some common pieces across her albums. For example, where would you listen to her music? Well, you'd probably listen to it dancing in the club, but also maybe contemplating your life on the drive home with her slower songs. The genre is absolutely this dirty pop 2000s genre. This album specifically focuses on the theme of life is a journey. And I really like this car imagery. I think it's very unique, so I wanted to keep that, especially because there are so many car references in her album, from sports car, two hands, green lights, revolving door, like she's on a loop like a racetrack. I think also this album can speak to test driving relationships, gaining independence and traveling and touring the world, but also being directionless and doubtful. But in addition to reflecting her musical identity, I also want her visual identity to be very personal. Because I don't really know Tate, I have to just come up with, what I can from her Instagram and interviews and whatever. So what do we know about her? Well, she's a dancer. She has this sort of sexy, confident Tatiana alter ego. She has a huge 2000s influence. She's Canadian. She's sporty. I'd say she's more like cool girl versus super girly or super feminine. She definitely likes to have a good time, but she also has a sort of sad girl introspective element to her, and she talks a lot about love. So with her musical identity and her personal identity, the archetype that I came up with for Tate McRae is a pop star version of the explorer. In movies, this type of character is like Indiana Jones or Lara Croft, which you might think does not make any sense for Tate McRae, but just stick with me. I will explain to you my reasoning. Explorers have a desire for freedom and independence. Tate McRae does not want to be controlled by the media. She is highly confident and she's coming into her own adulthood. I think she's really driven by self-exploration and creative exploration, and just new experiences in general really energize her. This girl has lived like 18 different lives and she's only 21. I think she definitely has that workhorse, creative, adventure-driven personality. Even if it's not exploring like tombs in Egypt, it's more about exploring herself and exploring her adulthood and celebrity. And so to match this, I would give her a distinct color palette. So focusing on hot, adventurous oranges, a sexy, confident red, which is also Canadian, but then also adding a warmer blue for that contemplative, sad girl vibe that she does sink into sometimes. I think these warmer colors are perfect for Tate McRae because I am almost certain that she is a warm autumn or a true autumn if you're familiar with the color seasons. And these colors, they're very heated and they're sexy, but they're not too girly or feminine, and they're very energizing like she is with her dance. I think the explorer archetype also makes so much sense for this album because of all this travel and car imagery. And then I think you also have to add this into her fashion. I do quite like her booty shorts and her corsets and her jerseys and her sock boots because she dances so much that her outfits definitely have to be very practical. And I think some of these elements are starting to become a little bit of a signature look for Tate. So I would stick in this era. I just think she needs to elevate this in some way. I'm not a stylist, so I don't know what that would look like, but I don't think that where she is now is like awful. I just think it needs to be elevated to be more artistically creative. Like, one of my favorite artists right now that is so good at fashion is Tyla. I'm like obsessed with every single outfit she wears. I'm so excited to see her at the Met Gala. I think we can also stick with her iconography of like the jersey numbers and the travel and traffic icons, but also add in some dance studio elements as well. Now, all of this might seem a little messy given all of these different moving parts, but if you want to make this even clearer, I think you could have tied this visual identity to a story within the album. Because this album, the idea behind it is exploring Tate McRae's identity as she enters adulthood and as she enters celebrity. And when people can relate to a story, they can relate to the person a lot better as well. So close to what means that life is a journey, not a destination. Tate has gone from the rink to the studio to the stage, from Calgary to LA, from sad girl to sexy girl, from dancer to singer. Like, her whole life has been such an evolution, such a journey, and she's still on it. Like, she's just getting started. And I think she's really trying to say that I can be all of these things. Like, I don't have to pick one thing. Don't put me in a box. I'm building my own box that I can sometimes leave, and it's growing with me. And that's why I really think that her album artwork really should have emphasized that travel car theme. And she actually did something that I really liked with a couple of her music videos that I wish she had continued for this whole era. Sports Car actually bleeds into Revolving Door with her walking out of a hallway into the new Revolving Door room. And it would have been so cool if she had connected all of the music videos this way, where each music video is driving to a different destination or a different mindset or different point in her life. I really hope that her tour that she's coming out with leans into this idea of being on this journey. And I hope that she tells a story with her concert. This is something that I love that Sabrina Carpenter does with her show, because her show goes through the course of a night. It starts in the evening and then it ends in the morning with espresso, and I think that's just so smart. And I think with Tate McRae, like, it could start getting in a car, driving down a road going somewhere, and you go through all these different destinations, you hit all these different points, and by the end you actually haven't reached a destination, but you've moved forward. You've progressed from where you started. Because so close to what? There is never going to be a final destination. And I have a lot of hope that this tour will be very good because her production recently has been so great. I loved this SNL performance, and even on Jimmy Fallon, I really liked the stage design, and also the lights were so good. I guess in summary, I don't think Tate McRae needs to have her identity all figured out to cement her place in stardom, but I do think it just needs to be a little bit stronger and a little more clear. And I think that it would be a really cool opportunity for her identity to be about the process of growing and finding her identity, especially since she's someone who grew up vlogging and spent so much of her time sharing on the internet. She seems very open and personal. So how cool would it be to show that a little bit more in her branding? If you are a regular watcher of my channel, just a little fun fact about this video. This was not the video I had planned to make I had written like a 10-page script. It was on the costume design of the movie Dune. I wrote this whole thing and then I was reading it back and I realized that literally 80% of it was me just explaining the incredibly confusing lore of spice economics and like the Bene Gesserit plan to rule the world. And so I was like, this is just like, it feels like a lecture. So I ended up scrapping the whole thing and I just came up with this. So I didn't plan this one super crazily, but I hope you enjoyed it. Anyway, I'd love to know what you think of Tate McRae and her branding. Do you think that this even is a problem that she needs to focus on? Also, what do you think of her new album? Do you like it? Was there something missing for you? I hope you guys have a lovely night and thank you so much for watching.